My favorite quotes goes, ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets inside them. Clear. Thank you, babe. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. Don't let what's happening around you get inside you and weigh you down. This really sets the stage for the conversation we're going to have today. I really want to bring to the surface some of the internal forces that are at play that might be draining your energy, might be draining your efforts, because when we're able to kind of take those things from the subconscious in places that we're not really thinking about that deeply, then we can be able to challenge and reframe those things. Again, in an effort to drain those energy leaks and make the most out of what it is that you're doing at your nonprofit. But before I get too deeply, my name is Petra Vega. I am an anti-oppressive leadership coach, and I help marginalized nonprofit leaders speak up in crucial moments in meetings, even when self-doubt may be getting in the way. If that sounds like you, I really want to encourage you to download my Nonprofit Disruptor Survivor Toolkit, where I share 5 tips to help you speak up in those meetings, even when you might be second guessing, even when self-doubt might be really loud, even when you may not be totally sure what you want to say or how to articulate your point. I give you 5 tips in this free resource so that you can get your liberatory ideas implemented and heard finally. So let's first start out with some myth busting. I think this is one of the ways that we can kind of have some things living rent free in our minds. And I want to remind us that these myths really were intended to reinforce dominant cultural norms, right? They really weren't about affirming our authentic identities. It wasn't about us having our liberatory ideas seen reflected in these ideas. And so I just want to remind us of that. And really our work as marginalized nonprofit leaders is to dismantle these beliefs and figure out, okay, what are some of the ways that they might be playing out and ways we don't intend them to? So the first one I've really seen is this idea that leaders are not allowed to show vulnerability. It's really giving like boys don't cry, girls don't cry, they, thems don't cry. And that's so ridiculous to me. We have feelings. We have so many feelings, particularly for those of us that are anxious or empathetic or what identify as highly sensitive. A lot of us have a lot of feelings. And I think I think that, dominant culture will have us believe that makes us soft and that we can't be trusted with decision making. But I actually think that our emotions are data, they are information. And I know, as someone who has tried to kind of push down my feelings and not really allow it to give me the information that I needed, that shit really was unsustainable. And like that stuff really leads into burnout, because anytime that you're rejecting yourself, that shit's going to play out in other ways, right? And so, I think for me, this really comes is reinforcing patriarchy and this idea that we need to be disconnected from our vulnerability. And I think it doesn't give us access to some of the other emotions that are really necessary in order for us to make change. Shit like righteous anger, like we have to feel our feelings so that we can know, like, that wasn't quite right. I really didn't like how you said that, or what you're doing is not okay. Like if we don't have access to our feelings, we'll never be able to feel that in ourselves, and we'll never be able to reclaim our voices as I know that we want to do. And that's something that I'm working with a client on right now, around like, how do we just feel our feelings? And I know that's a thing that people say, but that shit, if no one has taught you, is really complicated. And so right now we're experimenting with like, okay, can we just feel what we're feeling for a minute? It doesn't even need to be this like long, arduous thing, but can we just feel it? Like, not to intellectualize it, not to figure out why do we feel that way, but can we just feel it and allow that to process? And it's been so cool to watch my client literally change, that they can see that they can just feel an emotion and that shit will just come off of them. It's very cool, very cool. So I think this is the first one that I really want us to interrogate around, like, okay, the idea that leaders are not allowed to show vulnerability. The second one, this myth that I've heard, is this idea that leaders are born and not made. And I don't know who said it, but I think we just have this idea that there's like some people that should be leaders and there's other people that should be followers. And I think that's bullshit, right? Where really what I have seen is that people can rise to the occasion, that people can develop skills in order to become leaders, right? And I think this one really grinds my gears because of the ways that I think we define leadership. And like, this was part of my process. And I encourage you to even think about, what does it mean for you to identify as a leader, to think about what is your own definition. But here's mine that I want to offer into the ether. My definition for leadership is that leadership is a process about being responsible for self and responsive to others. It is a two-way street. And in that definition, you see that I really don't give a shit about your job title or what position you have and how much power you have. Leadership is really not about that, but it's a way of moving with people. It's not a position. But I think the way that we think about leadership that probably has been filtered through a lot of these myths, we just have these like distorted ways of understanding leadership, distorted that don't include us. And I want us to interrogate that a little bit, right? And so I even here's an example that I can think of early on in my career. I started out as a community grassroots organizer, and you would think, and I was working in a school, and you would think that, okay, the principal has the most power. And technically, in the hierarchy of a school system, yes, they do. But what I thought was so interesting was actually, in me learning like the relationships and getting to know people, it was actually the fucking school secretary that had a lot of the power. Like Miss Peggy, bless her heart. She got to say like, okay, is that permit being put in? Who's coming into the school? What platforms are we using? Where are the kids at right now? Like she was such a power player. But if you were only looking at leadership and power is like depending on the title that you have, you would miss her, right? And so I got really cool with Miss Peggy, right? Because I'm like, you need to identify who are the people who have power in order to grow your own power to really try to make the moves that you're trying to do. And so really that's an unconventional approach to think about leadership. And I want you to think about that. Here's another invitation that the next time that your brain really tries to hold on to this myth, this idea that like leaders are born and not made, and maybe you weren't made to be a leader, I want you to think about who are the people that you actually see as leaders, right? People in your family, in your friend group, in your community, people you admire and respect online. Like who would you see as a leader, and what about them makes them leaders to you, you know? And kind of gut check that with some of what this myth is telling us, you know? So that's the second one. The idea that leaders are born and not made. And the third myth is this idea that leaders need to have all the answers. Ugh, I hate this one. Because this one is all about like, okay, people who are allowed to like have access to people who are allowed to be like appointed to guide people, need to have like a surefire, fail-proof way of understanding and knowing what the fuck is up ahead. I think that's a lot of pressure for one person. I think it requires this leader to be well-versed in a lot of things. And I'm someone who's like, can we get a mile deep, but an inch wide? Like instead of being like trying to do everything, but not doing it that fucking well. And I wonder about the impact of us assuming that people in leadership have all of the answers. Like for those of us that other people may see us as leaders, but also other people we see as leaders, what are the implications of us thinking that like, oh shit, you must know because you're in this leadership position? When really what I want us to invite us into is this idea that like none of us are as smart as all of us, right? And that actually a sign of a good leader is someone who's able to be like, that's not my bread and butter. That's not the thing that I do well. But you know who does it well? This person, that person. Let's collaborate. You know, and I just think this idea around needing to know all of the things is a very short walk to doing all of the things. So it's like, well, shit, then if you know so much, do everything. And again, burnout, y'all. We don't need that. We need our energy and our time and our attention is so precious. You know that, I know that. And I think this myth really be fucking us up. I think this one also really like enforces the shame or the guilt or the anger that we might feel as leaders when we realize that this is not true, right? We can get really frustrated with ourselves and being like, sure, why don't I know more? And it's like, baby, there's only but so much to know. You're only one person, you know? And I think this one is really, again, kind of reinforcing this like hyper individualistic lone wolf way of leading that, again, if it hasn't been already clear, it's just sustainable as fuck, but also just limits your ability to do shit, right? Because no one is as smart as all of us. There are people on your team, for officially and unofficially, who may know something that has something to add to what you're doing. But holding on to this myth is going to keep you so distant from that possibility. So I've named 3 myths already. I have 2 more to go, but before I keep going, I really want to hear, have you heard these myths before? And have they been helpful or unhelpful to you, right? Again, this is just my take that I'm like, I think we could do away with these, but they might really been helpful for you. So I'd love to hear Again, these are the one is leaders are not allowed to show vulnerability. The second is leaders are born and not made. And the third is that leaders need to have all of the answers. So let me know in the chat. Have you heard these before? Are these new to you? Have they been helpful or unhelpful? I'm curious. Okay. So my fourth one, I kind of spoke to it a little bit, but I think it bears repeating and making it its own myth that I've seen, is that really a title or a position dictates leadership, right? And this one, I think a lot of them have a lot of assumptions. I think the assumption in this one is really that we then give a lot of power to people in leadership. Like I know before I moved up the higher ranks in my nonprofit jobs, I really thought that the executive director and like the program director and all of these people and like the executive suite or whatever the fuck, that people just knew so much more, right? Because I'm like, oh, they have all of this power and someone gave them this role, particularly if people were promoted. And what I have unfortunately learned is that's not fucking true. That's not true, because what has been true about my experience is there's so many times that I'm like, who allowed you to be responsible for the support and development of other people, right? And I think that we assume because people are in higher leadership positions where people maybe have teams of 10 and 20 and 30 and however many the book, that means that they're qualified to actually manage and support the personal and professional development of those people. And that's actually not the case, right? What is actually true is that that person was really good at a particular part of the role. And it just so happens that in order for you to progress in your nonprofit career, you just have to manage a team. Like that's just a thing that you have to supervise. But not a lot of people actually know how to supervise and support someone, And it even makes you think about, here's another quote, because I fucking love quotes. That quote that's around like, okay, behind every successful man is a strong woman. Sexism. That's bullshit, right? But really what we should be saying is like, okay, behind every leader is a strong team. Leadership requires charisma. Okay, that's related to my fifth one. Thank you for that one. So I'm just like, I think this idea around like it really, you need to have a particular job or role, I think really limits our ability to really acknowledge our power. Because if we don't have like the highest or the most prestigious role, we can underestimate what we can really do in order to make change in our organizations, in order to speak out, in order to shift things. I've been a middle manager for a long time, and you can't tell me that I haven't radically changed some organizations. Like you just can't. And so I want to encourage us not to surrender, that regardless of like whatever role we may have, I can probably guarantee you have way more power than what you think. Because power is just something that we all have. We just don't know that yet, or we don't know how to use it, and we don't know how to like gain access to it, right? And so what we are taught to do as marginalized folks is that we kind of just like acquiesce to powerlessness. You're like, okay, I feel powerless in large society and culture, and like I feel powerless at my job, and like, well, shit, maybe you feel powerless in some of your other more personal relationships. So just like this immersion, this swampiness of powerlessness. And I want to invite us to reject that perception. Yeah. Okay. So in the chat, we have this one around like leadership requires charisma. I think this one relates to my fifth and last myth around like that leaders should be extroverted. I think there's a certain energy, charisma, fucking outlook, just way of being that if we don't see someone that way, it's hard for us to conceptualize that person as a leader. I think this one is really one of the subtle ways that we can like shade and silence and shame those of us who are introverted, and those of us who are highly sensitive, those of us who are socially anxious, those of us who are neurodivergent. I'm like, peopling is very hard. And I just want to name that I've played into this too. Like back when I was doing grassroots base building, I often would gravitate towards, okay, who's the loudest voice? Like who's the angriest? Like how can I support in mobilizing this person towards action? And again, what I learned over time is that the people who were able to like sustain a campaign, the people who were able to like show up to meetings and turn out people and like actually do people's stories, which is really fucking important. Those people turned out to be more of the slow burning introverts, the people that were quieter, but like would still sign up for little things. And those two were excellent leaders, right? Like, not to shit the people who are extroverted or charismatic or the people with a great chat or whatever, but just like, oh, think about what are the ways that we may have what is it called? Like a tunnel vision idea of what it means to be a leader. And I think that, because many of us had learned that our voices don't matter, like this myth really gives life to that one. And I just want to be compassionate that if you have believed that for a long time of your life, and, maybe your life also gave you evidence of this being true, that like this myth is going to be a little bit harder to kind of shake out, but I do want to offer like the one thing that is true, and there's tons of research around this, is that folks who may not thrive in big social situations, who may not be the most charismatic or the most extroverted, or may not be the first person to speak up in a meeting, those people, what is also true about those people is those people are deeply empathetic, and they're such skilled thinkers, and they're strategic, and they often listen to respond, and some people just like to hear the sound of their voice, and so I just want to like just give a little love to you if that's you, and that is also like beneficial and a very valid way of leading. And that shit really helps you create a culture of really being seen and heard and valued at your nonprofit, because firsthand what it's like to not feel those things. And so once you get to either a leadership position or you start to identify yourself as a leader, you can then cultivate that with other people. So I want to pause again and ask for these two. Okay, have you heard these before? Have they been helpful or unhelpful to you? The last two myths I named was that one, myth number 4, that you need a title or position, and that's what it really means to be a leader. And then this 5th one is that leaders need to be extroverted, right? Or charismatic. I'll add that one to it. Yeah, let me know. Okay, we are about at the halfway mark. Now that we have brought some of those myths to the first surface, and maybe it has made you think about what are some of the other subconscious beliefs that you may have about what it means to lead, I want to give us some permission slips. I want to offer, one of the ways in which I really work with people around dismantling these beliefs and lots of others around leadership is really through the reclamation of our voices. And I really see speaking up as the vehicle by which we can start to unlearn these things, because then we get to challenge them. We get to find new evidence. We get to be like, oh, that's not all the way true. And my life is evidence of that. And so I want to get us started with a little bit more permission slips, if that would be helpful, around shit that you do not have to do in order to speak up authentically, right? If that is a thing that you're working on in your leadership right now, here's some permission slips, shit that you don't have to do, right? You can just surrender if you can on your own. If not, get some help in surrendering these things. The first one is that no, you do not need to be 104% healed first. I work with so many people who are like, I'm just on my healing journey and I just need to do a little bit more healing, and then I can speak up, and then I can get let my voice be heard. And I'm just like, actually, no, actually speaking up is part of the healing process, right? That there's so much that you've been holding on in your mind, and you have to go through the process of putting it out through your mouth and into the world. And that is another, again, valid way in order to heal. And that, healing is not linear. No one is going to be 100% healed, and that, being healed is not a prerequisite for you getting to be heard, for you getting to have your own back and being able to say what you want to say. Not a prerequisite, not a thing that you need to do. No, it's not step 1. The other piece that I really hear that I want to give people permission slip for is that no, you do not need to be overly confident. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You don't have to put on this suit of armor to then say what you want to say. You ain't got to do none of that, right? That my work with folks is really around trusting yourself. And in order for you to learn how to trust yourself, you've got to be willing to fuck it up. And what you and I could be doing is really developing the skills around I said something and that didn't really pan out the way I wanted to, or I said something and fucking wow, now people are taking my ideas and we're starting to move in the direction that I really think that we should have gone. What do I do with that now, right? We plan for both, what happens if you're heard, and then also what happens if you're not heard. But the idea here is that we really need to be willing to start somewhere, and again, just being okay, similar to the being healed part, you don't need to be at 96% confidence level to then speak. Again, I think it's through the acting of speaking up that you gain confidence actually. Another one I have for you is that speaking up is not dependent on whether or not people will validate what you're saying. And this one's fucking tricky, right? Because we really want, for those of us who have been taught that we should be seen and not heard, if we are to say something and someone is like, fuck, that was so fantastic, Petra, I had never thought about it that way, that's so illuminating, you know, we could really quickly allow that to be the measure about whether or not we should say something. And I get our need, our very like reasonable human need for external validation. And I think that's a slippery slope, y'all. I think that's a slippery ass fucking slope. So I just want to name that, right? That it is like normal for us to crave that, especially if we've never got it. But also that if that is the barometer by which you say something or not, is whether people are going to like what you say. If people agree with what you say, you're going to be saying you're going to be not saying a whole bunch of shit you really want to say. And I hate that for you because you've already lived this life where you haven't said it. I want to help you say it. And I think holding on to this one, it's not going to help you do that. The fourth permission slip I want to offer you for those of us that are, values aligned, I want to offer to you that no, my love, you do not need to be a perfect realization of your values. You know, I get it. There's a lot of folks that I work with that are like, I'm so afraid of saying something because what if someone like claps back? What if somebody calls me out? What if somebody fucking just drags my ass all over the internet? And I get it. And again, that's something that we can like work through. But I want to offer that like perfection is a white supremacist culture characteristic, right? That is not a thing that we want to embody, give life to, and that's not fucking real, right? That we will never perfectly be a realization of our values. We can strive towards it. We can strive towards alignment. I feel like someone recently, maybe one of my beloveds, was like, you know, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Y'all, if we can't consume, we probably can't be. And so again, I just want to offer that like, this is not a fair thing to hold on to the idea that like, okay, perfectly, once I'm perfect and, you know, everything that I say that I'm about, I'm actually doing, then I can say something, then I get to have my opinion be heard. I think that's unfair. I don't want that for us. You know, because what's normal is that, you know, change is nonlinear, right? Is that sometimes you're going to be on your shit and you're going to be like, you're going to be boycotting that one place that you know that you should be boycotting. And then you might fuck around and then you might buy from them, you know, and it just shit happens, you know, and I just want to give us a little bit of grace. And again, want us to kind of like sift through and put to the side all the things that we create as barriers to us speaking up. And this is one of them, right? And it's not necessary. It's not realistic, and fuck perfection, right? All of that. The last one that I have for you, which kind of brings us all back to with the myths, is that, again, permission slip to not have to do or know it all. You really don't. You really, really, really don't. Either one, you really don't need to know everything, and you really don't need to do everything. A lot of folks that I work with are really trying to do a lot, and what we're trying to work on is to scale back. They've got a good muscle around overworking, and now we're trying to right size their effort, because a lot of the folks that I work for have other creative pursuits. People fucking want to do music. People want to have hobbies. People want to go for a walk, right? We can't do all of those things if we're holding on to like the myths that I had named earlier, if we're holding on to, if we're believing these things I'm trying to give us permission to let go of. No one can do all of the things, right? Part of the self-trust and having your own back and believing in your voice, part of it is believing that whatever you can offer is what you can offer, and trusting that when you can offer more, you will, right? But it's not that like, okay, well, shit, I should do it. I have more space. I have more spoons. That's oppression. We don't want that, right? Like my liberation is about, okay, what do I have access to? What can I do today? Can I be satisfied? You know, like Adrienne Marie Brown named this thing around like, are you satisfiable? She had this question on her podcast, and I've like been so jazzed by it. And so I will often reflect on my experience to be like, oh, that was really satisfying. Like, and I want to be satisfiable. And so just this idea around like, you have to know or do it all. Don't figure out what is satisfactory to you and then live up to that, right? All of these are really inviting you. Like, what are your own modes of operating? What are your own beliefs that you want to live through? What are your practices that you want to hold? And if these aren't it, fuck these, you know? Making mistakes is part of the learning process. Effective leaders are resilient and adapt to new information. Very that. Yes, right? But I think often leaders will hide that, right? They'll hide the mistakes that they're making. I've had folks make mistakes and then bold-faced lie about it in my face, which is a choice. Those are choices. And if you have made those choices, I feel you. And I hope that you are in a place where you can make different choices, or that you're moving yourself to make different choices so that you can be someone who can understand that mistakes are part of the learning process, that taking in new information, that changing your mind after getting new data is a good thing. Those are all good things. Thank you so much, maybe in the chat. All right. So I'd love to hear, like, which permission slips did you need to hear today? What other permission slips have you come up with for yourself? Like, maybe there's something that I hadn't named. Please put that in the chat, in the comments. I'm going to invite you again. If you're like, yeah, I need some support around speaking up. I'm jazzed by this. I want to invite you again to download the Nonprofit Disruptor Survival Toolkit, where I offer 5 tips to speak up in the moment, without all the second guessing, without all the mind stuff, so that your liberatory ideas get heard and implemented finally.